All right, let's go to our next article. Kevin, this one is written by you. It's Reexamining the 2020 rule. Is it what you think it is? I love this article. So tell us about it. Like, is the 2020 rule outdated?
Yeah, so I wrote this article about 6 months ago.
It was your debut article, wasn't it, for RMM?
Maybe the second, so
The
first
second
or
one? Okay.
second.
It
Yeah,
was close. Yeah.
close when we first started. So it's about 6 months ago, and I think the origin of this article is try to help us understand, what the evidence-based science is showing us about this type of 2020 rule. Because we said it a lot as a clinician, but are we truly understanding the science behind that? Where does it come from? And why do we keep saying that, for the sake of saying that? Sometimes we utilize this type of approach so prevalently, and we forgot, what it actually entail. So that is the origin about this article, and I was looking into like the science involved, and I'm also very intrigued. I didn't know that before I wrote this article. It was actually this term is coined by none but other than an optometrist back in the 1990. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Anschel, and he's a optometrist and also a fellow in ocular and wellness science. So is he definitely have some credentials showing what he's talking about, and he was looking into specifically, not a 2020 approach, but what he calls a 3B approach, um, which stands for blink, breathe, and break. So blink, breathe, and break. So 2020 rule is actually a sub rule in the category of break, according to his word. So in a break accommodation, he actually advocate, 20 rule by taking away, like spending 20 minutes on the screen. You need to take a 20-second break by looking at things far away, about 20 feet wide. So that is the origin of why this happened. But the more we study about this premise, the more we actually know about this data is not considered outdated, but it's not being utilized in the right context. You know, what it does is basically to advocate, how children, young adults should, utilize, near break, regularly. But there's no scientific basis showing that this 2020 vision rule actually can be applicable to the, as a solution for myopia management. At least there's no very little science data involved to substantiate or support this type of premise. So, and then I dive into like what kind of study have they looked into? Specifically, they've done a lot of animal model study, and they found that there's little changes in the ocular profile. There's no signs of changes in choroid and scleral changes in the animal model. So that tells me that there's still a lot more that we have to understand and implement about this type of premise. And so later on, I want to kind of bring it to the clinician that, while this is very like easy to remember, not forgetful for every patient understand what 2020 means. But I want to allude to the fact that, they need to take breaks, not just an episode, but cumulative over time. Because a lot of time patients just fixate on 2020 at one specific episode, but they forgot about the cumulative approach. We need to do it on an ongoing basis. Make sure you do it at least 3 to 4 times a day in order to make it work. And there's a newer approach that I found pretty compelling. Is instead of 2020, we need to look into something in a more bigger context. They call it a 60-10 rule. So what that means, for every 60 minutes of new work or engage a near work activity, we need to, spend at least 10 to 15 minutes of, break, help our eye reset, in order to make it work a little bit more effectively than 2020 rule. So I think that is a more practical and applicable approach for our patient. And even though it sounds very gimmicky and, works for everyone to understand and not to forget, but in deep down, we need to understand, are we actually delivering evidence-based science for our patient? not just about saying that for the sake of saying that.
Hmm. Yeah. Ashley, have you used the 2020 in
Of
your?
course, I use it
I
up
do
until I
too.
read his editorial. I mean, it's so catchy. It's so appropriate for optometry for something to have 2020 in it. It's a hard habit to break. Like I use it all the time, but I've adopted more of what Kevin is saying, the 60-10.
Yeah.
It makes more sense. Like it almost didn't feel right saying 2020. It seemed oversimplified, but that's what we were doing. So when you know better, you do better. And that's where we are now.
Yeah. Yeah. I've tried to describe 2020 rule to, people, who are not in myopia management, like my in-laws or friends or whatever the case may be. And they all kind of just go like this and
Yeah.
smile at it. They're like, I don't know if I can do that. But the sixty
Yeah.
ten they can do,
Yeah, it makes more sense.
that's a lot, that is a lot easier for, I think, the patient to, and their parents to wrap their head around. It's like, okay, there's been an hour worth of screen time. Now you need a break. I think that's way more accessible.
Yeah, it's definitely doable and not overachieving. And clinician need to understand, this is just a slogan, so-called a slogan, but we really need to listen to, and look into the hardcore science and see what they're delivering.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that the 2020 took off when what did you call it, the BB&B, the
Yeah. The
original,
3B approach.
the 3B approach. It's interesting that the 2020 took off and the 3B approach did not. You know, I wonder why that is. If you're interested in getting the rest of the episode, consider becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. In addition to an extended version of this episode and every other episode that we do, you'll also get access to exclusive monthly bonus episodes of the Myopia Mindset. And I know you're interested. You've made it this far. You can do so on our Substack, myopiamindset.substack.com. I'll see you at the next one.